Is this the issue, and there will be other questions about other issues, I'm just trying to think back on your own career, because you've been you've been fighting for this for so long. Is the failure of Congress to achieve any kind of what you would consider meaningful immigration reform, is that going to be, as you look back, one of your biggest disappointments legislatively?
Yes, it would be one of them, though right up there running right alongside of it would be entitlement reform next to that. This one was a bit more bitter. I mean, the entitlement reform is just a very tricky and difficult, complicated issue. This one we could have done something about, and may do something about with a Democratic majority in Congress. We could have done something about this one. I had announced my decision to retire in November of last year, just before Thanksgiving, November of 2005, just before Thanksgiving. The debate on this was in December, but at the end of that, I left with, at Christmas time, 2005, I left with an extremely bitter taste in my mouth at the way the leadership had handled this. I thought it was totally irresponsible. I thought the way they treated those of us that were looking for a comprehensive approach, the way they demeaned and degraded the Senate bill and the Senate approach to this all through the spring, the way they did those hearings in the summer that were just nothing but a show for building a wall and creating a hard barrier.
This is the hearings in the field, in the regional areas. The
field, which were, but anyhow, all of those things left me with a very, very bitter taste. I don't have that bitter taste about Social Security, but I'm equally disappointed, and in the long run, the Social Security one is the one that's going to kill us and destroy us if we don't fix it.
Did anybody say anything personally angry to you and all of that? Sometimes disputes between members can get personal.
I spoke a couple of times in the conference, the Republican caucus, and on this issue, asking for a comprehensive approach, and got booed and shouted down saying, no, just stop them at the border. We got to have border security only. And then these chants of border security, border security. And that was all the members wanted. These members, they thought that was the only thing their constituents wanted. Turned out their constituents wanted something more.
Is that the first time you've been booed in the caucus by your colleagues?
Well, maybe I'm overstating saying booed, but I got groans, and then the next speaker would get up and say, my good friend from Arizona couldn't be more wrong on this issue, kind of thing. the usual thing that we do of always saying my good friend, my esteemed colleague, and all that kind of stuff.
That's when you know they're pulling the knife out,
right? Right, they're pulling the knife out on you there.
Well, I'm going to open it to students, but I have to follow up now with entitlement reform, because I can tell you're burning to talk about it, and you were and have been one of the leaders in every possible effort to do something about Social Security, which will run out of money at some point when the retiring baby boomers need it most, if you believe all the experts. Again, the question is, why does Congress seem to be paralyzed on this issue? And it doesn't matter whether it's a Democratic president, a Democratic Congress, a Republican president, and Republican Congress. What is it, as the problem becomes more and more urgent, that prevents the government from being able to act?
Because it's an issue that can be so easily, demagogued, and all you have, Social Security reform, or whether we're talking about Medicare reform, any of the entitlement reform, is extraordinarily complex. I have an economics background, and I've spent years working on Social Security reform, and I still only know, I think, maybe 5% of what is involved in just the Social Security, and I know little or nothing about what we're going to how we could possibly fix Medicare. So it lends itself to a demagogic response that says, don't cut grandma's Social Security benefits, or Jim Kolbe wants to cut your mother's benefits. And then how do you respond to that? With a 5-minute explanation of what I'm really trying to do with Social Security? They've lost you. Doesn't work. So there's no easy response to that. That's one reason. The second is that the benefits of reform are long-term. The downside of it comes immediately. You've got to make some changes that are going to affect benefits and taxes and some other things there. And so you're going to feel those immediately. But in the long run, you're going to have a program which people that are on our audience here today might actually get something from. The way it is now, there's no possible way they can ever have Social Security, at least the way it's structured today. My own view always was Social Security was the easy issue. If we could fix Social Security, then we can go on to Medicare. The unfunded liability of Medicare is infinitely larger than what we're talking about on Social Security. And on Social Security, we're looking at as much as a 35 to 40 trillion unfunded liability by the end of the next generation there. It's absolutely going to crush us. And at some point, we will have to change, and it will be politically extraordinarily difficult at that point. The longer you wait, the more difficult it becomes, because the more painful it becomes because the changes have to be bigger and harder and the cuts deeper in order to save the program. So I just think that it's just one of those things that's very, very tough. Members of Congress will grapple with it, and they'll say, yeah, you're right. I can't tell you how many times I heard this from people. You're absolutely on the right track, Jim, but not this year, not before the election. Can't we do that next year? And then there's always another year.
You were complaining about President Bush's leadership on Social Security reform because he did say that he had a mandate after the 2004 election, and he was going to use that political capital to reform Social Security and try to create a system of private accounts. What happened there? What happened in terms of his own leadership, in your view?
Well, President Bush got it half right, but he only went halfway. Our bill, when I say our bill, the only bipartisan bill in Congress, the Kolbe-Stenholm, now the last 2 years, the Kolbe-Boyd bill, was one that creates personal accounts, basically a 401k account. Takes a small part of the taxes you're now paying for retirement and would divert that into a 401k, where you get to basically watch it grow. You can make decisions about where you want to invest it in some limited way, into a stock fund, a bond fund, the same kind of thing that federal retirees now federal employees get to do with their 401k, and most 401ks are structured the same way. You would be able to do that, and that, I think, is the cornerstone, because that's the thing that young people are going to say, look, if I'm going to have to pay more taxes and I'm going to get less benefits out of the defined benefit part of this program, at least let me save something on my own and have some possible earnings from that. And so that's the key for the next generation. But in addition to having this nice chocolate cake out here, you gotta eat the spinach. And the spinach, you gotta pay for it. And there's only two things you can do. Well, three things. You can cut the benefits, you can raise the taxes, or you can borrow in the future, which is inflationary, does all those economic consequences. So you have to do something in order to face that music there. And that's what he never was willing to come up with a plan. He always said, there's a lot of good ideas out there, let's talk about all these ideas. Congress is never going to deal with those, come up with those things themselves. There's got to be a presidential plan, something that the president puts on the table. He did that with the drug benefit, with prescription drugs. He put a specific bill on the table, and then Congress worked it and passed something that wasn't exactly what the president wanted, but was enough that he was able to sign it. He never did that with this part of Social Security. So he just didn't go the distance. I kept begging him when he came to Tucson for one of his 60 town halls around the country. I said, Mr. President, you've got to cut out there and talk about some specifics. Yeah, we know, but let's just talk about this right now.